Okay. The room here is quite original. That means the wooden floor is original, that orchestra balcony is original, the lusters, also the flag on the wall are originally. What else? So, the furniture is not original. That is from 1967, from that old museum, that Soviet museum. That is not original, of course. That is footage. So the footage is original, of course, but not the scene there. And you can see there, the film or film material from the 8th May of 1945. It was taken for the Wochenschau. Wochenschau, you've heard about it? It was kind of news showing before a film was starting in cinema. It's very interesting. I will tell you some details about that film later. At first, about the history of that, or details of the day of the 8th May, or the Act of Surrender. Important is that Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April 1945, you know that, I think. Hitler named Admiral Dönitz as his follower, as Vice President, and Hitler also wrote down in his last will that the Germans are not allowed to surrender. He wanted the German civilians, and also the German Wehrmacht to fight till the bitter end. But after that suicide of Hitler, there were special surrenders in various parts of Germany. For example, Berlin surrendered on the 2nd of May 1945. The north of Germany surrendered on the 4th of May 1945. And so the government of Dönitz, or better Dönitz, it was clear that the German Wehrmacht had no chance to win the war. And that's why Dönitz decided to send Alfred Jodl to Reims. Reims was the headquarters of the Western Allied troops. And Dönitz wanted Jodl to surrender in front of the Western Allied troops. That means Dönitz didn't want to surrender in front of the Soviet troops. So only with Western Allied troops. There was a conclusion between the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union, between Great Britain and the United States, the anti-Hitler coalition, maybe you've heard about it, yeah, right. And they already conclude that if Hitler or the Germans will surrender, they only will accept an unconditional surrender in front of all members of that coalition. So the chief of the Western Allied troops, Dwight Eisenhower, said to Jodl, if you want to surrender, you have to sign an unconditional surrender, and also you have to surrender in front of the Soviet troops. So the Soviet troops, or representatives of the Soviet troops, were not in Reims, and that's why Eisenhower said, okay, sign a document, or you have to sign a document, and we will repeat the whole act of surrender one day later, again, in front of the Soviet troops. So in Reims there was signed also an act of surrender on the 7th May 1945, and one day later the whole act was repeated here in Berlin-Karlshorst. And not only because the Soviet troops wasn't in Reims, but also because Alfred Jodl, that German boy, wasn't high-leveled enough. And that's why here in Berlin came 3 persons from the Wehrmacht, 3 representatives, who had a higher level than Jodl. That was first Wilhelm Keitel. He was also the chief of the Supreme Command of the German Armed Forces. That was the highest level. That was the same position Hitler had before. So that was Keitel, and Keitel was also the Supreme Commander of the army. And then came Friedeburg, Admiral Friedeburg, who was the Supreme Commander of the Navy. Navy. Is that right? Navy, Marine, it's the same word, right? Navy and Marine? Marine? Navy and Marine, you're right. He was the Supreme Commander of the Marine. And the third guy was Generaloberst Stumpf, General Stumpf. He was the Supreme Commander of the Air Forces. And that was important, that 3 persons, all the 3 Supreme Commanders of the armed forces, because then, for example, the Air Force wasn't able to say, we didn't surrender, so we can continue the war. That's why the 3 persons. Eisenhower didn't come to Karlshorst again because he signed the act of surrender already in Reims. He sent a British general of the Air Force, Sir Arthur Tedder, is the name. The Soviet representative was Georgy Zhukov. I don't know if you have heard about him. Very important for that war, for the Soviet troops in that time. And he signed for the Soviet troops, and the Americans and the France was here as witnesses. Right, that's the word. Is it right? Witnesses? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. The text was the same. The text of the Act of Surrender, the document, was the same which was already signed in Reims. And it was determined that the war will end on the 8th May 1945 at 11 o'clock, 1 minute after 11 o'clock p.m. So the war ended on the 8th May. That was clear on the 7th May already. When the document was signed by the representatives of the Wehrmacht, it was after midnight. So the war was already ended when the Germans signed that document. And after that, the Germans had to go out of the room, and inside that room was a big party till morning. Now to the film, to the footage. You see there the airport, Tempelhof. That was the only airport in that time of Berlin. And the Germans was brought by British airplanes from Flensburg. Flensburg was the place where the government of Dönitz were sitting, or had their place. Here are the Soviet people, small person is Georgy Zhukov. That is the German airplane. Here is Keitel, Wilhelm Keitel. He always has a stick. It's very interesting, his behavior, because I think he acts like a winner, not like a loser. Okay.
Did he make any resistance? Did he question the document or resist?
Yeah, he discussed a little bit. We will see that later. But that could also, or that is because he needs some translation. He had his own translator, and then he asked something about the translation, and that's all. So not really what was inside the document, but also some formal stuff. Yeah. Okay, of course you know that the non-aggression pact was violated by Hitler. He started the invasion of the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941. So less than 2 years after that non-aggression pact. The planning of the war includes that the war will be an annihilation war. That was clear. That was part of the planning of that war against the Soviet Union. That means that there was issued a lot of orders which offend against the civilian rights, war rights. For example, the Convention of Geneva, right? Thank you. Which existed already in that days. We have here in that room the topic of the war prisoners of war of the Soviet Union, the Soviet soldiers who came in German captivity, and that Soviet prisoners of war are the second biggest group which were murdered, systematically murdered by the Nazis after the Jews. So you see here 60% died. Nearly 5.7 million Soviet soldiers were imprisoned by the German Wehrmacht during that war from 1941 till 1945. 60% of them died. That means that more than 3.3 million people died, Red Army soldiers. Before the war started, there were issued a lot of orders already. They issued by the High Command of the Wehrmacht, by Keitel, for example, Wilhelm Keitel. For example, the Kommissar order, I don't know, it's quite famous, that order. And in that order, or with that order, every German officer was authorized, thank you, authorized to execute an officer of the Red Army. So that was allowed now, because it exists that order. That offends, of course, against the civilian rights. You can imagine that. Come here, then you can see that in a better way. There were not only this commissars of the Red Army, they called commissars, and they were political officers. Maybe you've heard about that already. Also in the GDR existed that kind of political officers.
It was NKVD. They were to kill any NKVD personnel.
Right. But not only them, but also Asian-looking soldiers of the Red Army. And it was said that they are very, very dangerous because they're fighting in a really brutal way. And that's why it was allowed to kill them. The Jews, of course, because it was said that they are very dangerous in that ideologically way. And the women of the Red Army. In the Red Army were nearly 1 million women, and 500,000 of them were fighting. Okay? And it was also allowed to kill the women. Every officer of the Wehrmacht was allowed to kill a woman of the Red Army. The rest of the soldiers of the Red Army soldiers, came into camps. Came into camps. Camps is not the right word, I think, because it was just a field. Yeah? And they didn't get any food, they didn't get any clothes, they didn't get medical care. They was left on their own. You see here, they make that pit dwellings, that huts, little huts, in the ground to save themselves from the weather or anything. That is a picture from winter 1941, 1942, taken here in Wietzendorf. There was a huge camp. It's near Hamburg. So, not only far away in East Europe where that comes, but also here in Germany. In February 1942, it changed a little bit, because then it was allowed to bring the Soviet soldiers into the concentration camps, and they had to work there as forced laborers. But as you see, till December 1941, already 500,000 Red Army soldiers died, and till 1945 it will be again more than 2.5 million, although they came into concentration camp, because they had to work, but they didn't get enough food and so on, of course. The first...
They weren't treated very well when they were liberated by the Russians, were they?
No, right. They came again into camps, because Stalin had already said that if a Red Army soldier will come into German captivity, then he will treat it as a collaborator of the Germans. Yeah, right, that's right. And a lot of them came into German camps after they were freed by the Red Army, and then they came into Gulag. Yeah. The first experiments of that Zyklon B was made with Russians, Russian soldiers. In Auschwitz. You have been in Auschwitz already, yeah. Auschwitz was built up at first for Red Army soldiers.
This is the Russian War Memorial. It's huge. $7,000 Russian soldiers buried.
In 1979, Honecker visited his Soviet counterpart in Moscow, and then they kissed like that, just to say hello. It was a socialist custom called the fraternal kiss of socialism. It was painted by an artist from Moscow, Dmitry Vrubel, entitled In the Middle of a Deadly Love Affair. So after 9th November 89, it was no going back. More and more checkpoints were opened. And then ultimately the border was torn down. To your left you see a painting, man jumping the wall, Mauerspringer, 2 walls, and he jumps across. Border strip in between. To your left it's a quote from a poem by Erich Fried which reads, "Whoever wants the world to remain as it is, does not want it to remain at all." There's another one that reads, slow please. There are many walls to be removed. And there are the widely colored faces by French artist Thierry Noir, who used to paint that kind of faces onto the West Berlin side of the wall since 1984. And to your left, look, there's a Trabant car, slow down please, slow, breaking through the wall. Yeah. On the license plate, 9th of November 89 is painted. The date the wall came down. First opened, well, to your left, the wall opening, people going through. Another work of art by an artist from New York, Jim Avignon. On March 18th, 1990, the first free elections ever took place in East Germany. And then the freely elected East German parliament voted in favor of joining West Germany. And the Allied powers had to be asked permission, over 40 years after the end of World War II, still retained some reserved rights, but after some negotiations gave their approval. And of course, Germany agreed that the border with Poland is final. That was an important precondition, the Oder-Neisse line. No more territorial claims. So the reunification became possible on October the 3rd, 1990.
Right?
Well, don't. But with you, you're just getting scaffolding over your